So we are going to cover data representations, which are basic types of representation like frequency distribution table, relative frequency, percent frequency. So these are the basic data types which are available and which can be applicable for any type of data, be it qualitative or quantitative. Then specifically for qualitative data, we can use bar graphs and pie charts. Then for quantitative data, we can use histograms. That is most important part. We can use dot plots. We cannot use Excel for dot plots, but you can use pen and paper for dot plots. Ogive curve, yes, based on the cumulative frequency, we can go for Ogive curves. So these are for qualitative data and quantitative data. And then we are going to look at the stem and leaf representation, which is one of the representation techniques which can be used for ungrouped data. And we are also going to see the cross tabulation as well as scatter diagram. So cross tabulation and scatter diagram comes in picture when we are dealing with two variables, and all other representation types deals with only one variable. So we are going to look at one variable and two variable data representations in graphical type. So we'll start with the basic representations. So the PDF which I have shared with you, that PDF, if you go through, if you can go through quickly that PDF about qualitative data, just open the PDF, qualitative data representations, and you will see this data set in that PDF. Suppose I have these many observations with me. So total 50 observations are there, and the possible options are Coke Classic, Diet Coke, Dr. Pepper, Pepsi, and Sprite. So I'm just asking 50 participants which is their favorite drink, for example. So first candidate says Coke Classic, second says Diet Coke, and so on. So I have collected 50 observations from 50 participants. Because this is qualitative data, what max I can do is I can create a frequency distribution table as we have discussed in yesterday's session. So I'll count how many times Coke Classic is present, how many times Diet Coke is present, and so on. So I'm getting the frequency as 19 for Coke Classic, 8 as for Diet Coke, 5 is for Dr. Pepper, 13 is for Pepsi, and 5 is for Sprite. The total frequency is 50 because we have 50 observations. So this is the first data representation technique in a tabular format, that we can summarize how many times which entity is present in a frequency distribution table. The second type, next type, I'll also show how to create a frequency distribution table in Excel once we'll complete all these theoretical part. Next type is relative frequency. Relative frequency of a class is the fraction or proportion of items belonging to a class. So if you look at the formula, relative frequency is the frequency of that specific class or that specific label divided by total frequency. So if you look at Coke Classic, the frequency for Coke Classic was 19. So 19 times the Coke Classic is repeated out of 50. When I say 19 times it is repeated out of 50, what is the relative frequency of Coke Classic considering the total frequency as 50 is 19 upon 50. That is the same formula. Frequency of that level divided by total frequency. So 19 upon 50, if I do 19 upon 50, I get 0.38. Then for Diet Coke, the frequency is 8. So 8 upon 50, what is the relative frequency of Diet Coke is 8 upon 50 is 0.16 and so on. So these are my relative frequencies. What is the use of relative frequency? The first use of relative frequency is if you multiply relative frequency by 100, you get percent frequency, and you can easily calculate the percentage availability of each level or each class. The second use of relative frequency is these relative frequencies are used to draw the or to calculate the angles in the pie chart. So once you will start drawing the pie chart, I'll explain you how to use relative frequency in pie charts. So these are the two benefits of direct benefits of relative frequency. There are multiple other use cases of relative frequency. As and when required, we'll discuss those. So these are the relative frequencies. The rule says the addition of all relative frequencies has to be 1. Why it has to be 1? Because if you look at total 50 and if I divide 50 by 50, the total will come as 1. So even the relative frequency addition should come as 1. Now, if I multiply relative frequency by 100, the percent frequency is the relative frequency multiplied by 100. So 0.38 into 100 comes as 38. So I can say 38% observations or 38% of participants like Coke Classic, 16% of participants like Diet Coke, and so on. Again, the total of the percent frequency, because this is percent frequency, has to be 100. So the total of relative frequency has to be 1 and the total of percent frequency has to be 100. So this gives me the portion, what portion of my total frequency is for Coke Classic. This is proportion considering 1 unit. This is portion considering 100 units percentage. Okay, so these are the relative frequencies and percent frequencies. Bar graph. Now we have this table with us that Coke Classic is present for 19 times, Diet Coke for 8, Dr. Pepper for 5, and so on. So what max we can do is we can draw a bar graph. So we'll see how to draw a bar graph in Excel after completion of this presentation. So you can see, look at the x-axis. All the labels on the x-axis are distinct. They are discrete in nature. There is no continuity in between them because they are qualitative. They are representing qualitative data. And on y-axis, we have the frequency. So the height of the bar for Coke Classic is 90. So likewise, we have drawn this bar graph. Next is pie chart. As I have told you that relative frequency is used to calculate the angles, and the formula is relative frequency into 360, because in a circle we have total number of angles available which are 360 degrees. So we have to multiply relative frequency by 360. So relative frequency is 0.38 for Coke Classic. So if I multiply 0.38 by 360, whatever angle I get is the angle for Coke Classic. So how to draw the pie chart? Just consider this as a starting line or baseline. Considering this as a baseline and using this formula, relative frequency into 360 for 0.38, whatever angle you get, draw that angle from this starting line. So that becomes the angle for Coke Classic, and you can draw the line for Coke Classic. So this portion becomes 38% of Coke Classic. Now consider this as a baseline for next angle, and next angle is for Pepsi. Pepsi value is 13, that is 0.26. 0.26 into 360, whatever angle comes, you have to draw that angle considering this as a baseline. So that becomes the portion of Pepsi. Likewise, you can keep on drawing all the angles and you can create the pie chart. All these things are not required in today's world because in Excel on single click you can get bar graph and pie chart. But still, this is what happens in the backend if you try to draw the pie chart. So this is all about the basic data representation types and the qualitative data types. Now we'll move to the next type of data, which is quantitative. Now look at this table. Again, if you open the PDF of quantitative data representation, you will find this data set in that PDF. Year-end audit times in days. So every organization goes through the audit at the end of the year. So how many number of days have been taken for that organization for that year-end audit? So first organization, we have given 12 days for that audit. In second organization, we have given 14 days for audit, and so on. So these are the number of days in terms of year-end audit. Now all these are numerical values. Every value has some numerical significance because this is quantitative data. So what we can do is, again, we can convert this data into a frequency distribution table. But while converting frequency distribution table, we have to create groups, that because if I try to count how many times 12 is present, that is immaterial. That has no meaning. We have to create a group of, like, suppose 10 to 14. If I say 10 to 14, and then I can count how many values between 10 to 14 are present. So 12 is between 10 to 14, 14 is part of 10 to 14, and so on. So I find 4 values which are between 10 to 14. So I'll write frequency as 4. So frequency of this class is 4. Frequency of this 10 to 14 class is 4. Likewise, frequency of 15 to 19 class is 8, and so on. Total has to be 20 because I have 20 observations. So while converting any quantitative data into frequency distribution table, or while converting any quantitative data in a grouped data format, this I can call it as a group data format, we have to take care of these 4 things, like how many number of classes should be there, what should be the width or length of the each class, what should be the class limits, upper limit and lower limit, and what are the class midpoints. Why number of classes are important? Because in this case, how to go for the number of classes? First thing is you have to find out which is the minimum and which is the maximum of these values. I think 12 is the minimum value. Yes, 12 is the minimum value, and I guess 28, no.
33.
33 is the maximum value. So the range becomes 12 to 33. My range of data becomes 12 to 33. So I have to have class intervals which will cover my list value and which will cover my max value. So because the list value is 12, I'll start my class intervals from 10. And because my max value is 33, I'll end my class intervals at 35. Now between 10 to 35, how many class intervals I can have? Now there are multiple options. I can go for, suppose, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, and 32, 40. So I can have only 3 class intervals with width as 10. Width of all 3 class intervals is 10. So we have to decide what class interval, how many class intervals we have to go for, what should be the standard width, and that we can decide based on the what frequency we get for each class interval. And if I go ahead with only 3 class intervals, so 10 to 20, roughly it will come to 12 number of objects, because this is 4 and 8 for 10 to 19. Then 20 to 30 is roughly 5 plus 2 is 7, and then 30 to 40 will be 1. So you can see out of 20 observations, almost more than 50% of observations are presenting one class interval itself. That means we have to divide our class intervals in more smaller chunks. Because if you don't get a proper distribution of data, then you cannot analyze that data properly. I'll come to the data distributions and histograms in this session itself. But for defining number of classes, you should have enough amount of distribution in each class interval so that you can go ahead with analysis. If my one class interval consists of more than 50%, almost 60% of data, then that means my distribution is not correct. I'll not, even if I use the same data for analysis, I'll not get correct analysis out of that data. So that is what is important, that is number of classes, width of the class, and class upper limits and lower limits. Now when I say class midpoints, why class midpoints are important? Whenever we deal with group data, or whenever we deal with quantitative data in a group manner, suppose if you don't have this original data with you, consider you don't have this original data with you, your manager has just given this frequency distribution table to you for analysis. Now based on this frequency distribution table, you can just come to know that there are 4 observations which are between 10 to 14. There are 4 observations which are between 10 to 14, but I don't know which are those 4 observations. I don't know which are those 4 observations. So always remember, whenever you try to summarize data, whenever you try to summarize, this is frequency distribution table is nothing but a summarization of the original data. Whenever you try to summarize data, you always lose some data. Whenever you try to summarize data, you always tend to lose some data. Fine. Now what data I'm losing here? I don't know the 4 actual values which are present between 10 to 14, but I know there are 4 values between 10 to 14. Now, if I want to predict, or if I want to judge which are those 4 values, I know the 4 values are between 10 to 14, but I don't know which are those 4 values. So what I can do is I can either consider all 4 values as 10, which are lower limit, or all 4 values as 14, which are upper limit. Now in that case, what will happen if my 4 values are like randomly, I'm taking some numbers 12, 13, 12 and 11. If I'm randomly taking these numbers, if I'm taking all values as lower limit, or if I'm taking all values as upper limit, my deviation, possibility of my deviation of each item from the actual value is on larger side. So how to minimize this deviation? So the third way is to minimize the deviation is to consider the class midpoint as the observations. What I'll consider is all 4 observations are present at class midpoint, which is the middle location, class midpoint. So if I'm considering all 4 observations as 12, which is the class midpoint, the possibility, the probability, the chance of having deviation from the actual value is very less. Even if I consider 12, it is the actual value. Even if I consider 13, the deviation will be only +1. Next is 12, actual value. Next is 11, deviation is only -1. Because if this is my, if these are my 4 values, and if I'm considering the middle value as my actual value, then the deviation from middle value of all the values will be very less compared to the boundary values. And that's why in a grouped format, if you look at any formula, you go for mean, median, mode, or any kind of standard deviation, any formula, I will come through, we'll go through the all formulas also. You take any formula for group data, you'll always find MI as part of the formula, which is class midpoint. Because we don't have the actual values available with us, and we have only group data available with us, we have to consider all the values in that class which are at the class midpoint. So class midpoint is important part of every formula in statistics in case of group data. And this is the reason why we consider class midpoint. Have you understood the concept of class midpoint, all of you? Can we go ahead?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
So this is about frequency distribution table for group data. Now next is dot plot. How to draw dot plot? Simple thing. Again, we have to look at the range. The minimum is 12 and the maximum is 33. I'm using the same data set. So if minimum is 10, I have to draw the line from 10 till 35 because the max is 33. On this line of 10 to 35, my first observation is 12. So what I'll do is I'll go to 12 and I'll put a dot above 12. Next is 14. I'll go to 14, I'll put a dot upon 14. If I get another observation of 14, I'll put another dot above the first dot of 14. Likewise, I can draw a dot plot. So it is very simple to understand the dot plot. From dot plot, you can get the clear picture about what my data set is. But then these dot plots are feasible and are useful for only small data sets. 20, 30, 40, up to 50 even. 50 data points you can plot on a dot plot. But if you have thousands of data points, 10,000s of data points, then dot plots are not useful in those cases. So this is just a pen and paper method for small data sets for quick understanding about data set. So this is one of the way to represent quantitative data. Next type is histogram. Now for histogram, we always consider the group data. So these are my groups. Now in these groups, let me tell you that there are two ways to write the groups. So if I say my groups are 10 to 15, 15 to 20, 20 to 25, and so on, suppose 25 to 30. So when I say 10 to 15 and when I say 15 to 20, if I have a data point with value 15, if my data point is 15, then this data point 15 should be part of this class or this class. Important question is, this data point 15 should be part of which class? So this 15 is part of second class. 15 is part of second class. So it is always including the lower limit, and excluding the upper limit. So 10 to 14.99999 is actually my first class limit. Then 15 to 19.999 is my second class limit, and so on. So even if I write 10 to 15, that 15 is not part of first class interval. So this 10 to 15 is equivalent to writing 10 to 14. So in some reference books and some textbooks, you can see the class intervals as 10 to 14, 15 to 19. Clear distinction is there. Or in some textbooks, you can find the overlapping class intervals also. But still, this is one of the ways to write the class intervals. This doesn't mean that 15 is part of first class interval. Okay. So these are the two methods. So in this reference book which I am referring, from which I am taking all the notes, they are using this method to represent the class intervals. So just look at the x-axis in this case of histogram. My x-axis is continuous in nature. So for values between 10 to 14, there is some frequency on y-axis. Immediately from 15, I'm starting with the next set of values. Immediately from 20, I'm starting with the next set of values. So my x-axis is continuous in nature. So this in this way, if my x-axis is continuous in nature, what type of graph I'm getting is a histogram. And this is the base concept in any kind of analysis. Always remember, histograms are most powerful techniques, because histograms gives you the distribution, idea about distribution of data. How? So easiest way is just draw the midpoint of all the bars which are available on y-axis, and try to draw a curve using these midpoints. So what you get is a data distribution. So from this, it's similar to something like this. So from this, I can get some kind of data distribution. Always remember, distributions will give you idea about two things. Just a minute. Okay, so distributions will give you idea about two things. First thing, what is the spread of my data? And second thing, how my data points are, or how much my data points are at the distance from my middle location, that is my mean. So we are going to discuss all these things in variance and standard deviation in tomorrow's session. But that's why distributions are very powerful technique, because they give us idea about the spread of the data, as well as how my data points are at the distance from my mean value. Fine. So the histogram is a base concept. in terms of representation, we will see how to draw histograms in Excel also. Next is Ogive curve. Ogive curve, to draw the Ogive curve, we have to first calculate the cumulative frequency. So this is another type of frequency apart from normal frequency, cumulative frequency. Now there are two types of cumulative frequencies, less than cumulative frequency, LTCF, or greater than cumulative frequency, GTCF. Now when I say less than cumulative frequency, let me ask you one question. If I ask a question like how many observations are below 25 or below 24? How many observations are below 24? What I'll do is, to count how many observations are below 24, I'll add 4, 8 and 5, all three.
17.
17, right.
Just a minute. So when I say 4, 8 and 5, 4 plus 8 plus 5, that is 17. I have 17 observations which are below 24, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes. So same thing I am doing in case of less than cumulative frequency. How many observations are below 14? 4, which is the same, which is frequency of first class. If I go for observations below 19, I have to add 4 into 8. That becomes 12. Then if I ask you how many observations are below 24, then I have to add 5 to 12, that becomes 17. 7 to 2 plus 2, 19. 19 plus 1 becomes 20. So likewise, I can count number of observations below the upper limit of the class. So whenever I want to count number of observations which are less than upper limit of the class, I go for less than cumulative frequency. Now the second type is greater than cumulative frequency. Similarly, if I ask you a question, how many observations are greater than 15, for example, how many observations are greater than 15? So for observations greater than 15, I have to add 1 plus 2 plus 5 plus 8, all 4. That becomes 16. So I have 16 observations which are greater than 15. So likewise, if my question is how many observations are greater than lower limit of the class interval, then I go for greater than cumulative frequency. So it depends on what type of problem I'm solving. I can choose either for less than or greater than type of cumulative frequency. So these two statements are very important in cumulative frequency. If you want to find number of observations which are less than upper limit of the class, go for less than cumulative frequency. And if you want to go for greater than lower limit of the class, go for greater than cumulative frequency. Okay. Can we go ahead?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Now, based on the cumulative frequency, if you look at the cumulative frequency, whenever we are talking about less than cumulative frequency, what we are dealing with is the upper limit of the class intervals, correct? Less than cumulative frequency, we are always linking those with upper limits of the class interval, like how many observations are below 24, below 29, below 34, we get less than cumulative frequency. So always for less than cumulative frequency, we are linking those with the upper limit of the class intervals. So this becomes my x-axis, this becomes my x-axis, and this becomes my y-axis, in short. So these upper limits becomes my x-axis, and these less than cumulative frequencies will become my y-axis. And if I try to plot a graph of this as x-axis and this as y-axis, I get this kind of graph. This is called as less than Ogive curve. This is called as less than Ogive curve. And if you can see, I have plotted 4 against 14. So this 4 is against 14, not against 15. And so on. This is against 19. This is against 24. And so on. So this is my less than Ogive curve. Similarly, if you just consider this as your x, which are the lower limits, and if you consider the greater than cumulative frequency values as y, and then if you try to draw a graph, what you will get is greater than Ogive curve, which will be exactly opposite to this, something like this, greater than Ogive curve. So likewise, you can have two types of Ogive curves, less than Ogive curve and greater than Ogive curve, based on what type of cumulative frequency you are using. So if you are using less than cumulative frequency, you can get less than Ogive curve. If you are using greater than cumulative frequency, you can get greater than Ogive curve. Now we will see how to draw these Ogive curves also in Excel. Once we'll start with Excel session. Next graphical representation type is stem and leaf. Now in case of stem and leaf, as the name suggests, we'll have one stem and multiple leaf values. We'll have one stem and multiple leaf values. So consider this as data set. Now in this data set, again, this is a kind of pen and paper method. We cannot use Excel for stem and leaf. So in this case, just look at the first row. Just look at the first row. First row consists of 112, 72, 69, 97, and 107. So what I can do is I can just write down these values in a column format. 69, 72, there is no value which is in the 80s. So I'll keep a blank for 80s. 97, 107, and 112. So I have some values in 60s, some values in 70s, some values in 90s, 100, and 110. Now in this case, what I am going to do is we always consider the unit place as my leaf value. The unit place as my leaf value and the remaining portion of the numbers as stem. So I'll draw a line between the unit place of the values and remaining portion of the numbers. And this becomes the left hand side becomes my stem and the right hand side becomes my leaf values. So stem and leaf. So similarly, because my max value is in 140s, so I'll have a blank for 120, a blank for 113, blank for 140. So this is a stem and leaf representation for only first row. For these 5 values, I have these 5 representations. Now consider second row. I have a number 73. So if number is 73, it will go with the stem of 7 and I'll add another leaf of value 3 and I'll put a 3 ahead of 2. Next value is 92. 92 will go with the stem of 9 and after 7 I'll add a leaf of 2 and so on. So I'll repeat this process for all other numbers. I'll repeat this process for all other numbers and what I'll get is something like this. What I get is something like this. So this from this I can try to recreate the original data. My original numbers are 69, 68, 72, 73, 76, 73, 76, 75 and so on. So I can recreate the original data from stem and leaf. And this is what I can get as stem and leaf representation. Okay, now in this case, what is the only thing which is left is if you look at the leaf values, they are not in proper order. If you look at the leaf values, they are not in proper order. So they have to be in sorted manner. They have to be in sorted manner. So if I sort the leaf values, I get this representation. So in previous, you can see 69 and 68 was the representation. I'll sort them. It will become 8 and 9. In case of this, it will become 2, 3, 3, 5, 6, 6 and so on. So I've just sorted all the leaf values in that stem itself. And this becomes the final stem and leaf display. This is my final stem and leaf display. Now, there are not much use cases, applications of stem and leaf, but this stem and leaf is the base or the foundation of histogram actually. So if you rotate this stem and leaf anti-clockwise, what you get is histogram actually. Now, whatever data representation types or techniques we have discussed, like frequency distribution table, relative frequency, percent frequency, bar graph, pie chart, then dot plots, histograms, Ogive curves, all these are useful when we are dealing with only one variable, when we are dealing with only one data set, one variable. But generally in reality, we have to deal with multiple variables, at least 2 variables. So we have discussed tabular and graphical methods used to summarize the data for one variable at a time. Often a manager or decision maker requires tabular and graphical methods that will assist in the understanding of the relationship between 2 variables. So cross tabulation and scatter diagrams are the 2 methods to represent 2 variables. So cross tabulation is a tabular method and scatter diagram is a graphical method to represent 2 variables. So look at one example of 2 variables. Suppose this is my data set. I am having information about, suppose, 300 restaurants. I am having information about 300 restaurants. I am visiting my first restaurant, and after visiting my first restaurant, if I am checking what is the quality rating for my first restaurant and what is the average meal price for that restaurant. So the quality rating is suppose good. I find good quality at that restaurant. and second is the average meal price is $18. Just a minute, somebody is trying to connect. Okay, fine. So if I'm visiting first restaurant, the quality rating is good for first restaurant and average meal price is 18. I visit second restaurant, the quality rating for second restaurant is very good and the average meal price is 22. Then third restaurant, quality rating is good and the average meal price is 28, and so on. So I have data about 300 restaurants and I have quality rating for those 300 restaurants and I have the meal price for those 300 restaurants. So for every restaurant, now I have information in two variables. First variable is quality rating and second variable is meal price. Now, if we have to represent two variables, then we can use one tabular method, which is cross tabulation, and one which is graphical method, that is scatter diagram. Now, if you look at the type of the variable, quality rating, you look at the values, good, very good, excellent. So this is, I can say, ordinal scale. The quality rating variable is of ordinal scale, and meal price is ratio because it is currency. So I'm dealing with one ordinal scale and one ratio scale variables. Now in this case, in case of cross tabulation, what we do is we can represent the same data of 300 restaurants in cross tabulation format in this way. So in rows, I'll take one variable and in columns, I'll take second variable. So in rows, I'm taking quality rating as a variable and in columns, I'm taking meal price as a variable. Okay. Now, in this case, if I try to ask you what is the meaning of this 42? Yes, anybody? What is the meaning of this 42? This 42 means there are 42 restaurants out of 300. There are 42 restaurants having good quality rating and having meal price between 10 to 19, both. It is connected with both, one in row and one in column. What is the meaning of this 40? There are 40 restaurants out of 300. There are 40 restaurants with good quality rating and meal price between 20 to 29. What is the meaning of this 28? There are 28 restaurants out of 300 with excellent quality rating and having meal price between 30 to 39. What this 6 means is there are 6 restaurants out of 300 with very good quality rating and meal price between 40 to 49, and so on. So all these cells in this area, are connected with one in a variable which is in rows and one variable which is in columns. So we call them as joint values. And all the values which are in total column or total row, this is total row and this is total column. So what is the meaning of this 78? The meaning of this 78 is there are 78 restaurants out of 300 which offers meal between $10 to $19. There is nothing related to quality rating. Irrespective of quality rating, be it good, very good, excellent, there are 78 restaurants which offers the food between range $10 to $19. So what I can call these 78, 118, 76, 28, 150, 84, 66, these are my marginal values. So always in a cross tabulation, we'll have few joint values and we will have few marginal values. Now, this is the first data set which we have discussed during the presentation, the 50 observations about the cold drink choice. Now, first thing is I have to convert this into a frequency distribution table. Correct? I have to convert this into a frequency distribution table. So how to convert this into a frequency distribution table? So first thing, I have to have all the distinct names like Coke Classic, Diet Coke, Pepsi, maybe Dr. Pepper and Sprite. These are my 5 distinct names. So how to get these distinct names? So what you can do is you can just copy and paste all these values in a different column just for time being. Now the next step is you have to go to data. You have to go to data tab, and in the data tab you'll find one option called as remove duplicates. You'll find one option as remove duplicates. Okay, just click on that option, remove duplicates, and don't change anything because we want to remove duplicates from column D, which is the copied column. Just click on OK. Just click on OK. It will give you a message, 45 duplicate values found, 5 unique values remain. So this becomes your unique values, set of unique values. So you don't have to find which are the unique values and then in manual operation you will miss out something. That will not happen if you follow this process. In data, you can go for remove duplicates. Now based on what version of Office you are using, the location may be something different, the symbol or icon may be something different, but this option will be there, remove duplicates. Okay, and you'll get all the distinct values from your set of data. Now what the next step is we have to do is we have to calculate or count how many times Coke Classic is present, how many times Diet Coke is present, and so on. So for that we have a ready-made function, inbuilt function in Excel. And if you want to use any function in Excel, always you have to start with equal to sign. So put equal to, and the function name is COUNTIF. COUNTIF. So count if I'm putting a condition, and based on that condition I'm trying to count the values. So COUNTIF into bracket, it will give you the syntax also. First I have to define the range of the values, and second I have to give the condition or criteria. So the range is all the values, all 50 values becomes my range. Yes, comma. What is the criteria? I want to count number of occurrences of Coke Classic. Number of occurrences of Coke Classic. So there are two methods. I can either give Coke Classic in hard-coded format like this, Coke Classic. I can put a closing bracket, enter. So 19. 19 times Coke Classic is present. You can see the formula, count if B2 to B51, and condition is if Coke Classic is present, count that occurrence. So there are 19 occurrences of Coke Classic. Second method of doing the same thing, instead of writing Coke Classic the whole value, what you can do is you can give second argument as the class, as the cell number B2. Sorry, it is D2. So D2 means this Coke Classic itself. You will get the same result, 19. If you look at the formula, instead of writing Coke Classic, I am writing D2 where Coke Classic is present. Fine. Now I have to repeat this operation for remaining cells also. So what I can do is, if I just copy and paste it in the next cell, what happens is it is taking the argument correctly, D3, but look at the first argument. The first argument has also shifted by one cell. As I have shifted to next cell, the first argument B2 to B51 has become B3 to B52. So as I keep on moving to next cells, even the argument number will keep on changing. So in this case, what I have to do is I have to keep changing this second argument, which will become D4 in next cell, which will become D5 in this cell, and D6 in this cell. That is okay. But I don't want to change the first argument. I have to keep it constant, B2 to B51. So in that case, what I can do is I can put a dollar sign in the part of the formula which I don't want to change, which I want to keep constant. So if I put $B, $2, $B, $51, I'm giving an indication or instruction, or I'm requesting Excel that don't change this part of the formula. Even if I copy this formula somewhere else, don't change this part of the formula. Okay. Now if I copy this cell and if I paste it here, now look at the values. So B2 to B51 has been constant in the first position, but the second argument D2 is now changing to D3. Now I have to just copy this thing for remaining cells. So drag and drop. This is called as autofill option. This is called as autofill option. And then I'll get the frequency distribution table easily. So this is my frequency distribution table. This is how you can create a frequency distribution table from list of values. Even if you have thousands of values, that is just matter of 2 clicks and one formula, and you'll get the frequency distribution table. Now next step is how to draw a bar graph and pie chart for this frequency distribution table. Just select all the values, your x-axis and y-axis. Go to insert 2D column, clustered column, simple type, and you'll get the bar graph. This is your bar graph. And then how to draw the pie chart? Again, select all the values, click on insert, click on pie chart, 2D pie, simple pie. So this becomes your pie chart. So this is how it's very simple. I am not going to give more time because these are very basic things which you must have done in Excel. These are basic features of Excel, how to draw bar graph and how to draw pie chart. Now in this case, if you want to modify your pie chart, if you want to give some different look to your pie chart, you can do that. If options are available in your version of Excel, you can do that. So in this way, I can represent that what percentage of values are there in what type of options. Even for this, I can go for some different type of visualization. So all these things you can try in your Excel. Now this is our quantitative data, and for which I have to draw the histogram. So first I have to convert this data into a group data, and then I can draw a histogram of group data because I have to create a continuous data out of it. So in Excel, in case of histogram, there is a concept called as bin. There is a concept called as bin. So what we call as class interval, that class interval is nothing but a bin in Excel. That class interval is nothing but a bin in Excel. So apart from the data values, the actual data values, I have to also give the bin ranges. I have to also give the bin ranges. So I'll give the bin range as 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30. Suppose 35 also, if there is any. Yes, 33 is there. So these becomes my bin ranges. So my first bin ends at 10. My second bin ends at 15. Indirectly, I'm telling that my second class interval is 10 to 15. My third class interval is 15 to 20, and so on. So these are my bin endpoints, bin ranges. Okay. So I have to also mention the bin ranges if I have to draw histogram in Excel. So I have the original data with me, year-end audit time in days. So I'll remove this. I'll just keep it year-end audit time. And these are my bin ranges. I have these two data sets available with me. Now I can go for histogram. So go to data analysis, and select histogram option and click on OK. If you click on OK, it will ask for input range and bin range. So what is my input range? Input range is nothing but your actual values. Your actual value. So this becomes your input range, including label. Okay. And bin range is these values, including the heading. So this is my bin range. Labels. In every option, you will find this option, labels. That means I have labels in my first row. Whatever range I have selected, the first cell consists of the label. So I'll tick on this. If you have not selected the label row, if you have started from 12 and started from 10, then you don't have to click labels. Output range, where you want to display your output. So suppose I want to start my output from this location, for example. And what I just want chart output. I don't want anything else right now. I just want chart output. So click on chart output and click on OK. If you click on OK, what you get is this. These are your bin ranges, bin values, and these are your frequency values for those bins. And this is your histogram. Now, histogram is right, but the only thing is it is not continuous in nature. It is not continuous in nature. So to make it continuous in nature, what we can do is just click on any of the bars. Just click on any of the bars. It will by default select all the bars and right click. Right click on any of the bars. Have you done this? Then click on format data series. Once you click on format data series, it will give options like series overlap and gap width. Minimize the gap width to 0%. Minimize the gap width to 0%. What you get is histogram. What you get is histogram. Okay, so now we'll continue with the Ogive curve, and now we'll try to draw the Ogive curve. So for Ogive curve, as we have discussed, there are two types of Ogive curve: less than Ogive curve and greater than Ogive curve. The less than Ogive curve is based on less than cumulative frequency, and greater than Ogive curve is based on greater than cumulative frequency. So first we have to draw the less than and greater than cumulative frequency. First we have to calculate less than and greater than cumulative frequency. So what I'll do is I'll first calculate the less than type of cumulative frequency. So how to calculate less than type of cumulative frequency? The first value will be as it is 4. The next value is the frequency of current cell plus the previous total. The frequency of current cell plus previous total. Similarly, I can repeat this process for remaining cells. So this gives me less than cumulative frequency. This gives me less than cumulative frequency. Yes. Similarly, for greater than cumulative frequency, I will start from the bottom. The first value is as it is, the current frequency. For the next frequency, it is the frequency of current cell plus previous total. Frequency of current cell plus previous total. Likewise, I can repeat this process for remaining cells. And I can get greater than cumulative frequency. So this is how I can get the less than cumulative frequency and greater than cumulative frequency. Now, once I have calculated the cumulative frequencies, we have discussed that we map less than cumulative frequency against the upper limits. So I'll copy the upper limit column and less than cumulative frequency column. Okay, so this is mapping of upper limits against less than cumulative frequency. Similarly, I map lower limits against the greater than cumulative frequency. Lower limits against the greater than cumulative frequencies. Now, if you have seen while doing copy and paste, if I'm copying these values, because these values consist of formula, if I just try to copy it, it will give something else. So what I have to do is I have to paste as values only. Then it will paste the actual values only, irrespective of formula. So always remember, if you want to copy the values, paste it as values only. Okay, fine. So I have to plot less than cumulative frequency against upper limits and greater than cumulative frequency against lower limits. So it's a simple thing. Again, just select the data sets, go to insert. There is a option called as line chart. Let me see, where is the option of line chart? Yes. Okay, line chart, and just click on the line chart. So this becomes your less than cumulative frequency Ogilvy curve. And similarly, you can draw a greater than cumulative Ogilvy curve also. So for that, you have to select these two values, insert, and go to the line chart. So this becomes your greater than cumulative frequency. So this is how you can draw less than and greater than cumulative frequency curves, Ogilvy curves. Now in yearly earnings, you'll find this data set is a bit large data set. It has almost 299 to 300 values. So it's a data set of almost 300 values. And now we have to convert this into a histogram. So if I select all the values, just to look at the minimum and maximum, if I select all the values, I get minimum as 0 in the ribbon and maximum as 1,44,499. 1,44,499. If that is my minimum and maximum, how can I define my bin ranges? My bin ranges can be, the first is I can start with 0. And if the highest value is 1,44,000, what I can go for is maybe 50,000 as my first bin range. 1 lakh and 1,50,000. In this case, I'm trying to create only 4 bins with width of 50,000. So maybe I have to go for a smaller bin values of 25,000. So I'll go for 25,000. So 25,000, 50,000, next will become 75,000 and so on. So till 1,50,000 I'll go likewise. So these becomes my bin ranges. So if this is my bin range, I'll just try to draw histogram for this bin range. Data analysis, histogram, input range is this, and bin range is this. Output range, suppose I have to start my output from this location. Okay. Now look at this histogram. Even if I minimize the gap between the bars, what is more important in this histogram is I have few observations. I have few observations which are greater than 1,50,000. Then I have few observations at 1,50,000, 1,25,000. But look at number of observations between 25,000 to 75,000. So if you just try to okay. So look at the values. 104 observations are below 25,000, and that 123 observations are below 50,000. Only 40 observations are below 75,000, 9 observations below 1 lakh, only 2 observations below 1,25,000, 1 observation below 1,50,000. This is okay, fine. But there are 4 observations. Suddenly there are 4 observations which are above 1,50,000. So the 4 observations which are above 1,50,000 are kind of misfit for representation of my data, because my maximum data is concentrated between the values 25,000 to 75,000. So that becomes common behavior of my data. That becomes common behavior of my data, that my data points are majorly between 25,000 to 75,000. If I take the total comes as 267. Out of 299 values, my 267 values are between 25,000 to 75,000. That means almost 85%. So if 85 to 90% of data is between 25,000 to 75,000, then these 4 values becomes kind of misfit, and that is coming here more. You can see a bar on more. So these 4 values are kind of misfit for my behavior of data. So what I can do is I can try to find the values which are greater than 1,50,000. The values which are greater than 1,50,000, like you can see one value here itself, 3,67,000. 3,67,000. So that means this 3,67,000 is a kind of misfit for my data representation. So what I can do is I can remove these 4 values, because I find that these 4 values are kind of misfit for my data. I will remove these 4 values and I'll recreate the histogram with new values. So first I have to identify which are those 4 values which are greater than 1,50,000. So this is 3,67,000. So what I'll do is I'll make it 0, because I don't want to consider this value 3,67,000. So I'll make it 0. So it will come into this value. 16 will become 17 because of one addition of 0. I'll find next value which is greater than 1,50,000. I'll recreate histogram using same bins but new values, because now these four values will get added into 0 column. So I'll again go to data analysis, histogram. The input range will remain same, bin range will remain same, but the output, suppose now I want to display output from this location, and click on OK. Now you'll get this. So this is a changed histogram. Now you can see we have removed those 4 values from here, and now I'm getting some kind of good distribution in this data. Now if you want to go into more details, what you can do is you can create smaller class intervals, maybe of 15,000, and you can go for 10 class intervals between 0 to 1,50,000, and then you can get a good histogram. So again, using histogram also you can identify the misfits or outliers. So I'm going back to my original Excel sheet which I have shared in the morning with you, with all of you on WhatsApp. So only last sheet is present. So this histogram 2 we have covered. This was actually corrected data, and that's why we have got 20 zeros instead of 16 zeros and no values above 1,50,000. That's why I have shared the new file to you with you. Now scatter diagram. The same example, scatter diagram, we have discussed in the presentation also, that I have data for 10 weeks in terms of number of commercials and the sell of products. Okay, now I have to draw a scatter diagram for these numbers. So what I can do is I can select both the columns where my X and Y values are present, go to insert, and go to scatter diagram, simple scatter diagram, the first option. If you'll click, you'll get a scatter diagram. It's that simple. Okay. Now in this scatter diagram, if you look at the scatter diagram, you don't have any values on y-axis almost till 35. You don't have any values on y-axis almost till 35 for x. So what I can do is just click on y-axis, all the values of y-axis, right click on that selected y-axis, and then click on format axis. Click on format axis. Once you click on format axis, it will give the minimum and maximum, which are default 0 and whatever is the maximum. I'll change the minimum value to 35. I'll change the minimum value to 35. Click on enter and you'll get a new graph. Just to get more clarity, because there is no meaning in keeping empty space in our graph. So my y-axis is now starting from 35. So this gives me more clarity, and I can see the upward trend. Overall trend is upward. That means there is a positive relationship. So as my x-axis value increases, my y value also increases. That means as I will increase the commercials, number of commercials in media, my product sale is expected to increase. Now how to draw a trend line? We have seen that in presentation. So click on any of the data points. By default, it will select all the data points. Click on any of the data points, right click, and there is one option called as add trend line. Just click on add trend line. Now once you click on add trend line, it will give multiple options to you. Now we are not going to discuss non-linear relationships in this course. This is a basic course, so we are going to discuss only linear relationships. Linear relationships, linear correlation and regression, everything will be based on linear relationships. But if you want to go ahead, you can try out all the other things like exponential, logarithmic, polynomial, power and moving average kind of relationships, trend lines. But our focus in this course will be on linear relationship. And what you can do is you can also click on display equation on chart and display R squared value on chart, just for your reference. We are going to discuss all these things on day number 4 in regression. And just increase the font size for better visibility. Now if you look at the equation, y equal to 4.95x plus 36.15. This is equation of a straight line. This is equation of a straight line, y equal to mx plus b. The equation of straight line is y equal to mx plus b. It is the same format, y equal to mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept or constant. So the slope or the x coefficient is 4.95 and the y-intercept or constant is 36.15. And this is the equation of this straight line. Now I call it as a trend line, or we call it as a trend line. So this trend line is nothing but your line of expected values. This trend line is nothing but your line of expected values. Line of expected values. Now if this is my line of expected values, as we have discussed during the presentation, there will be deviations between expected value and actual value. So these are my deviations between expected value and actual value. And once I call these as deviations, what is the meaning of deviation? Deviation is nothing but the difference of actual value from the expected value. Now, whenever I'll do analysis, why I'm doing all this analysis is for some benefit. So if this is my trend line, I'll continue this trend line, and what I'll do is I can try to predict that if I release, suppose 10 commercials on some day, if I release 10 commercials, what is my expected number of sell? So I'll try to plot a y value for x is equal to 10, correct? And from that I can get a prediction that what is my expected sales for 10 commercials. What is my expected sales for 10 commercials? So because we have a limitation in graph, what we can do is we can put x equal to 10 in this equation. It is similar to that. If I put x equal to 10 in this equation, what value I'll get is the expected value of y. Expected value of product sales for 10 commercials. So what is that expected value of sales? It is equal to 4.95 into 10, which is the X value, plus 36.50. Simple. So it comes as 85.65. So my expected sales is 85.65 for 10 commercials. But when I'll actually release 10 commercials in the media, what actual sales I'll get may be something different from this. Maybe something different from this. It may be 84, 83, 86, 87, it may be 90, I don't know. So there will always be some difference between the actual values and the expected values.